And so why is it valuable to have fluid power companies like your own companies, developing technologies for electric vehicles and machines? And what expertise can this bring to those developments? And Chris, maybe I'll start with you this time.
Well, I think the assumption has to be made that the hydraulics aren't going to be leaving these machines. And so you need the expertise of companies like ours that have all of this experience and understand how the hydraulic systems work. And the other thing is, it's not just as simple as putting an electric motor on the pump and nothing changes. There are a lot of changes that need to be made to the hydraulic system to accommodate, the speed on demand and the high accelerations and the high torque at low speeds that the electric systems can provide, which is a benefit. But we also have to adapt the hydraulics so that they perform best and perform most efficiently, because at the end of the day, these are still being driven by batteries, and we need to maximize what is a very finite energy source for these machines versus the diesel engines that they're used to working with.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's a question that we asked ourselves basically. What can we bring to this electrified world in which there are a lot of big players making already a lot of motors, inverter, etc. And what can we bring? We selected at least three key points on which we think that there is something to add to this electrified transmission and product. The first one is obviously the off-road condition understanding, because our market, our application, and our customer are really facing a tough driving condition, I would say, all the mud condition, temperature, etc., etc. So having the capacity to better understand this harsh driving condition and to inject this requirement into the design of the product is something which is quite unique. And I don't think there are a lot of electric players who have the knowledge of this tough condition. The second key point on our side and our understanding of what we can bring to our customer for this electrified world is what I may call the customization needs. Our industry is not, except maybe on some specific market, but it's not a volume industry. We remain in a number of machines and quantity per year, which are not so high. And in the same time, with a high level of diversity in terms of architecture and machine requirement. So having the capacity to handle both requirements, being low volume with some customization, but bringing also the right price to the final customer is something that I think we have the capacity to do. And the last key point on my side is obviously the machine behavior, because at the end, the transmission is completely driving the quality, the smoothness, and the feeling and the pleasure that the driver will have to drive the machine. And when you are doing this in hydraulic, there are some things that you can control, but you cannot control everything, because basically the oil is doing more or less what it wants sometimes. When you are dealing with electric, you can control everything, and you can accurately decide what quantity of electron and at which speed you want to drive your transmission. So being capable to transform the hydraulic behavior of the machine that you had initially in electric behavior is something that we think has quite a value for a final customer.
Okay. And so what role do you see hydraulics technologies playing in electrification then, Eric?
I think like Chris, I think that we will keep hydraulic on our machines for a long time, because there are a lot of space and duty cycle and application on which being capable to do full electric would be complicated, and especially on the working hydraulics, I would say. I think our industry is coming to the conclusion that especially for linear actuation, moving to full electric is quite complicated, and keeping hydraulic at least for a linear actuator is something which will probably remain for a long time.
Okay. And Chris, what role do you see hydraulics playing in electrification?
Well, as Eric said, and I think I said earlier, hydraulics aren't going away. Hydraulics continue to be the most force dense and most tolerant of harsh environments among the technologies. There are full electric or electromechanical technologies that are there. We've been doing it in the factory automation space for many years, but there are a lot of limitations: cost, size, weight, and also ruggedness. And those things will evolve, and eventually that will become a more viable technology. And there's some interesting alternatives already out there. But I think, for the vast majority of machines, we're going to continue to use, hydraulic pressure and flow to get the work done.